A collapse triggered by one quiet mistake. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't reckless. It was a small, almost invisible decision made during an ordinary moment. And yet, that single mistake would unravel billions in value and expose how fragile the system had quietly become. This story matters now because modern markets don't fail from chaos alone. They fail from precision, from systems so optimized that even a minor error can cascade beyond control. In a world ruled by automation, leverage, and speed, understanding how a quiet mistake can trigger massive collapse reveals a danger most people never see coming. It began inside a large financial institution known for discipline and caution. Their processes were tight. Their controls were respected. For years, nothing went wrong. But that consistency bred comfort. And comfort allowed one assumption to go unchallenged. The mistake lived inside a routine adjustment. A parameter changed slightly. A safeguard relaxed just enough to improve efficiency. The logic was sound. The risk seemed negligible. On paper, nothing meaningful had changed. The system continued operating as expected, processing millions of transactions without incident. At first, the impact was invisible. Positions aligned. Reports looked clean. Risk metrics stayed within limits. But deep inside the machinery, the change altered how stress was absorbed. What once dispersed pressure now concentrated it. The system still worked, but differently. The early reveal came as market conditions shifted. Volatility picked up. Correlations tightened. Normally, the institution's models handled this with ease. This time, responses lagged. Adjustments arrived seconds late, then minutes late. The difference was subtle, but in leveraged systems, subtle delays matter. Traders noticed fills behaving oddly. Hedges didn't offset exposure as cleanly as expected. Small losses appeared where none usually did. They flagged the issue. It was reviewed, dismissed as noise. After all, nothing had broken yet, but the mistake was already doing its work. As positions grew and markets grew less forgiving, the system began amplifying stress instead of smoothing it. Each adjustment fed the next imbalance. Each correction arrived just late enough to deepen exposure. The institution wasn't taking excessive risk. It was mismeasuring it. And that mismeasurement, quiet and technical, was setting the stage for a collapse no one was prepared to see. Because when failure comes from a small mistake, it rarely announces itself. It waits. The pressure built slowly, almost politely. As markets grew more volatile, the institution increased activity, confident in systems that had never failed them before. Trade scaled up, exposure widened. The models adjusted, but not with the same precision they once had. The quiet mistake was distorting signals just enough to matter. The reveal deepened when liquidity began thinning in unexpected places. Assets that normally absorbed large trades with ease now slipped on execution. Spreads widened for no obvious reason. Hedges that should have neutralized risk left behind small residual exposures. Each one was manageable. Together, they formed a pattern no one recognized yet. Risk reports still looked acceptable. Stress scenarios still passed. But those scenarios relied on assumptions a small adjustment had subtly altered. The system believed it was diversified when it wasn't. It believed reactions were instantaneous when they were delayed. It believed buffers existed where they no longer did. The early conflict emerged when a sudden market move hit during an otherwise calm session. Nothing historic, nothing headline-worthy, just a sharp shift that tested correlations. Instead of stabilizing, positions moved together. Losses stacked instead of offsetting. Traders scrambled to rebalance, but their actions fed back into the system, amplifying pressure rather than relieving it. Inside the institution, confusion spread. Desk heads compared notes and found inconsistencies. Numbers didn't line up. Exposures looked different depending on which system produced the report. Engineers traced data paths. Analysts reran models. Everyone sensed something was wrong, but no one could pinpoint the source. As the day wore on, margin usage climbed faster than expected. Liquidity buffers shrank. The institution began unwinding positions, not in panic, but in precaution. Yet every sale pushed prices slightly further, triggering more recalculations and deeper exposure. The feedback loop tightened. By the time the mistake was finally identified, a single parameter change buried deep in the system. The damage was already done. Reversing it wouldn't rewind the market. It would only reveal how exposed the institution had become. What started as a harmless optimization had transformed into a systemic vulnerability, and the collapse, no longer theoretical, was accelerating towards breaking point. The breaking point arrived with brutal efficiency. A routine margin check triggered alarms across multiple desks at once. Positions that should have offset each other were bleeding in unison. The losses weren't catastrophic yet, but they were synchronized, and synchronization was a danger. As traders rushed to stabilize exposure, the system reacted against them. Every hedge placed arrived late. Every adjustment assumed liquidity that no longer existed. The quiet mistake had reshaped the feedback loop, turning defensive actions into accelerants. What was meant to reduce risk now intensified it. The conflict escalated when counterparties noticed the strain. Credit lines tightened. Haircuts increased. Clearing firms demanded additional collateral. None of it was personal. None of it was punitive. It was automatic. Risk systems responded to signals without mercy or context. The institution felt the walls closing in, not from panic, but from process. Inside risk management, scenarios collapsed. Models that once showed resilience now displayed cascading failure. A single stress event rippled through portfolios, triggering margin calls faster than capital could be mobilized. Liquidity that existed on paper vanished in execution. Prices slipped between orders. Gaps widened. Leadership convened emergency meetings. The question wasn't whether losses could be contained. It was whether time still existed. Every minute mattered. Every delay multiplied exposure. Selling too fast would crash prices. Selling too slowly would exhaust capital. There was no clean path out. As the institution began forced unwinds, markets felt the impact immediately. Prices jerked. Volatility spiked. Other firms adjusted defensively, amplifying the move. What had started as an internal problem was now bleeding outward, touching assets and desks that had nothing to do with the original mistake. Traders across the market sensed a shift. Liquidity pulled back. Bids disappeared. The environment turned hostile, unforgiving. The system no longer distinguished between strong and weak hands. It punished movement itself. And in the center of it all, the realization set in with chilling clarity. The collapse wasn't driven by greed or fraud or reckless ambition. It was driven by a single quiet error, now multiplied by scale, speed, and interconnection. The institution wasn't fighting the market anymore. It was fighting time. The collapse finalized in a way that felt almost unreal. There was no dramatic crash bell, no single headline announcing the end, just a sequence of automated actions that stripped the institution of control. Positions were liquidated. Collateral was seized. Lines of credit closed without conversation. The system executed its own conclusion. The climax wasn't loud, it was efficient. Within hours, years of disciplined performance were erased. Billions vanished not through speculation, but through mechanics. The mistake that once seemed harmless had passed its point of correction. The market had taken over, indifferent to intent, blind to explanations. As news leaked, confidence cracked. Counterparties distanced themselves. Analysts rushed to explain what had happened, searching for recklessness, for excess, for scandal. But none existed. The truth was more unsettling. The institution had followed its rules. It had trusted its models. And that trust had been misplaced by a single overlooked assumption. The resolution came slowly, painfully. Investigations traced the collapse back to the adjustment no one questioned. One parameter, one optimization, one decision made in pursuit of efficiency. The lesson spread quietly through boardrooms and risk departments across the world. Systems were reviewed, safeguards restored, margins widened, speed was reconsidered. Not because markets had changed, but because the illusion of control had. Modern relevance could not be clearer. Today's financial world is built on precision, automation, and confidence in invisible systems. But those systems don't fail loudly. They fail silently, compounding small errors until correction becomes impossible. The collapse wasn't caused by ambition. It wasn't caused by greed. It was caused by believing that perfection had already been achieved. And in markets, that belief is often the most dangerous mistake of all. Subscribe to join the journey.